looks like a pod with no power to me. Here we go. Some people ask what that liquid is. That's just 99% rubbing alcohol. Man, the fight these things put up. There we go. How's that for some fresh filters? Oh. Yeah, there we go. That'll keep those death farts away. Let's move on to the actual problem. Yeah, we just had to do a little bit of maintenance on this one first, of course. Those filtering capacitors are of the ceramic type. All ceramic capacitors naturally decay over time and lose their effectiveness. That can lead to death farts in the case of HomePods, so at this age, we just replace those filters in every HomePod that gets repaired while we're in there. David, hey, welcome. Ooh, and thank you. Thank you. Why do you think so many HomePods need power replacements? Yeah, no, it's... I've got my best guess on the website under the no power common issue, but basically it just seems like the manufacturer of this diode in particular just had a few weeks of bad ones. And it's strange because, you know, we've got certain date codes that are the ones that fail, and we've got plenty more examples, older and newer, that work just fine. We know pretty much for certain now that there was just a bad batch of these diodes floating around out there. So, it's kind of unfortunate that Apple tells their customers that it's their own issue to deal with. But what tends to happen actually is on startup and more often during software updates, the logic board demands more power. And that seems to be when those crappier than usual diodes fail. Because we get a lot of people that message us that are like, hey, my HomePod was working just fine, and then I unplugged it and moved it to a new spot or a new home, and now it just suddenly won't power on. Or more often, I did software updates, and either during the update or right after the update, it stopped powering on. And so people call Apple support, and get this. I have in writing an Apple support person telling a customer that their hardware failure in their HomePod was actually a software issue that they confirmed on their server side. And I told them, I was like, I doubt that. Go ahead and send it in. I'll prove them wrong. And they sent it in. Sure enough, we popped it open. Exact same diode had died. And, no surprise, we got it replaced and it powered on without a problem. So, that pretty much confirmed my theory. Or at least one of them. But it's a one and done kind of thing with this issue in particular. Even though there are so many of them out there with this problem. Like I was saying earlier, it's only a particular date code of these diodes that are failing, so once you get it replaced, even with the same spec, newer or older diode, you'll never see that same failure again. Unfortunately, there's also like zero correlation to the date code of the diode and the serial number of the HomePod. Not that it would really matter, there were only 2 production runs of the first gen HomePods, and we've seen both of those production runs have this crappy diode in it mixed in there. So the only way to tell is by taking it apart. And at the very least, there's no sense taking your HomePod apart just to see if it has the bad diode or not. At least wait until it fails first, and then you can worry about it. It's not going to cost you any more time or effort if you were to preemptively replace a diode that's going to fail versus waiting till it actually does fail and then replacing it. And that's the same, that goes to the same for sending a HomePod into us here. If your HomePod's working just fine, it's going to cost you the same for us to take it apart and preventatively check and see if it even has that diode, let alone replace it, as it would be for you to just simply wait for the HomePod to have a problem worth actually sending in. That said, death farts are not an issue you want to put off. As soon as you start hearing death farts, you want to unplug that sucker and figure out what to do with it, because that will absolutely kill your subwoofer, and that will make your repair more expensive. If we can get to it and fix what we need to fix and replace what we need to replace before that subwoofer gets roasted, that's a good day. Oh yeah, and Apple doesn't even repair any of these, at least for the first gens. They don't do any repairs on these whatsoever. No matter what the problem is, they go straight to recycling. They might diagnose what the problem was and log it for, keep in mind for tracking in future products, what have you, but point is they don't repair any of the first gens that get sent back to them. They all get dismantled. Every single HomePod first gen that exists came from one of the first 2 production batches. Even the refurbished ones in the white boxes, those are from the same production run, just repackaged. So yeah, Apple, of course, has no idea what issues plague their HomePods, because they don't even bother fixing them. Do I ever get tempted to moving into other areas? I absolutely do. What I like to look for, I'm always, ears and eyes out for people emailing me with whatever they've got that needs to get fixed. But my general rule of thumb, when people are reaching out to me, because I do get requests all the time for other stuff, but pretty much if there isn't a specialty shop or person already out there offering a repair service, and I'm able to, I feel at least somewhat confident that I can fix your device, then I'm more than happy to at least take a look at it. And I'm proud to not charge for what I can't fix. I've got a few examples on my website of what we have fixed. Otherwise, I think like we've got like Xbox Elite Series 2 controllers for like stick drift. We've had LG monitors with their USB-C ports that need replaced. The ultra-fine monitors. We've had Microsoft Surface that needed a new battery, you know, whatever. I do get asked here and there about AirPods, and unfortunately that's not something that I can really do. The AirPods Max, there's already somebody out there that repairs them, and to buy parts for them, you pretty much buy the parts from that guy, and what I would have to charge on top of the cost of parts, I'd be basically matching or slightly exceeding what they're charging. They've got it down. So AirPods Max are a no from us, but there's another service out there that handles those just fine. That's where I send people that ask about the Maxes. And then the Pros, like the earbuds, they're too tedious and fiddly to work on, and parts aren't that easy to get. And I mean, like you could buy some really cheap knockoff parts or whatever, but every time I just take a quick look at how to, take AirPods apart and how the, for example, battery is attached to it, it just does not look like it's something that I could do for a reasonable amount of money in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable result too. Like if they were my own AirPods, I'd probably be doing some janky stuff, but I'll fix any of my own stuff, no problems. Anything that breaks, that's mine to fix now. Man, especially after the experience that I had with the mechanic. Never, ever, ever again. I pretty much always do all of my own work on my cars too, but a few months ago I got a right-hand drive 1989 Nissan Fairlady Z, and it's slightly newer and slightly more complicated than the older Z that I have that I've had for over 10 years now, that I'm very familiar and comfortable with. So it needed a little bit of maintenance, needed a timing belt, and I was like, I don't have a whole lot of time to do this right now. Maybe I'll finally go to this local specialty shop that specializes, that as a matter of fact is named after the car that I want worked on, and have them do the 120,000 mile maintenance on it. Boy, was that a mistake. $7,000 later, we have a new drive shaft, a new radiator, new fluids through the whole system, new hoses here and there, a few odds and ends, and the timing belt, of course. With a few problems. I get it home, drive it around for a few days, and develop a coolant leak. That's when I started digging around and looking around and find that one of the coolant hoses that they had replaced, they had just placed right in front of the crank pulley, which is a rotating assembly. So obviously the crank pulley rubbed a hole through my coolant hose and caused that, but luckily I had actually already bought a whole set of replacement coolant hoses for that car, anticipating replacing them all myself, but ultimately deciding to take the car to the shop to have all the work done. Yada yada, big mistake, whatever. And so I fixed that. A few days later, I'm on the highway with my kid in the back, and we hit stop and go traffic. And as we're slowing down in the middle of the highway, the engine literally does a freaking bang, 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 and dies. Seizes, pretty much. And managed to push it over to the side of the road, the side of the highway, mind you, and find that the one of the bolts for the timing cams had come loose, destroyed the timing belt, and it's an interference engine, of course, so the pistons kissed the valves and literally totaled the whole engine within less than a week of getting my car back from these guys. Supposedly more than 20 years of experience working on this particular car from the guy that worked on it. I think they've been in business for more than 40 years, if I'm not mistaken, but I call them back up, and
I'm having trouble
beautiful. I call them back up, explain what just happened. They are shocked, but happy to take the car back and see what happened. So, we get the car towed back up there on a Monday. They say they're going to have the highest priority looking at this thing and get right back to me. They get back to me Thursday. And they tell me on Thursday that they popped the hood and confirmed that it needed a whole rebuild. Which is like, thanks. We've already established this by now. So thanks for wasting already a week not doing anything on the car other than telling me what we already knew. But they already had another engine in the shop, 4 parts ready to pick and pull. They pulled the cylinder heads off that parts engine, sent them off to a shop to get decked and checked, pulled the motor out, swapped the heads over, replaced a few gaskets here and there, did an EGR delete while they were there, popped it all back together. Took them a month, I think, like just about a month. Granted, I think a few weeks of that was the machine shop, but still. So I get the car back. We're getting ready to drive it across the country. And I'm checking over things. I notice I keep having a coolant leak. I keep having to top the coolant off. And that's strange. So I start poking around, of course. One of the coolant feed lines, one of the coolant hoses going to one of the turbos was missing a clamp. So I clamped that back on, and we seemed pretty much good to go. Drove it around for a few more days. Our cross-country road trip came up. And I start losing coolant again. We make it to we make it down to South Nevada or something, and I start noticing that I'm starting to have to top my coolant off again. And I'm looking over things, and that's when I notice the radiator cap on the brand new radiator that they replaced for me was still my old original radiator cap. And you might be saying, well, like, that's not a huge deal, dude. Like, just go get another one and replace it, right? My problem with that is they had originally charged me like $25-30 for a replacement radiator cap when they did the original timing belt job, the original $120,000 or 120,000 mile maintenance. I looked back at the invoice and I was like, I thought they charged me for a new radiator cap, and sure enough, they did. So then I'm like, okay. Long story short about the cross-country road trip, we, for other reasons, decide we're just going to turn around and go back home. It was just taking way too long for us to get through with the kid. We basically had to stop every hour. And when I get home, I'm like, okay, we're going to tear this sucker apart and just go over everything and make sure there aren't any other surprises that might completely screw me. Thankfully, it seems like, for the most part, they put everything else back together acceptably. There were a few like grounds on the back of the engine missing, but nothing like critical. Like everything would pretty much work just fine without it. And who knows if that stuff was even connected when I got the car, but it is a little annoying when they claim to have taken the extra time to make sure that every single nut and bolt on that car was where it was and put back together and nothing was missing or anything like that. And I find, things not completely put back together yet still. Tearing apart the car further, I find a plastic bag, like just blocking the airflow on my radiator. It's just like sticking up against it. And I take it off, and of course it's a cam seal, which the only reason a cam seal bag would be in my radiator is if somebody was replacing the cam seal, and the only time anybody's ever replaced the cam seal on that is when I took it to that shop for the 120,000 mile maintenance. Oh my goodness. It just never ends with these guys. Even when I think I finally found everything, and they've finally, un-effed everything that they've effed everything up. Long story short, the one time I ever trust another shop to work on my car, and it completely fired back at me, and I will never again. In less than a week, I managed to convert my older Z into not only just a turbo, but a manual 5-speed from an automatic, non-turbo, in a week. With a wife, a kid, and freaking 2 jobs. Like, what? Specialty shop with 20 plus years of experience. Screwing other people's cars up is what I'm thinking. Professional freaking hoopties. It just boggles my mind, because if they're messing things like that up on a car like this, what are they doing to the average Joe's cars that are rolling in there that get effed up? And then the average Joe doesn't know any better. Car breaks down and they're like, oh, better take it back to the shop. They did so great last time. When it was the shop that probably caused the problem in the first place. Anyways, end of rant. I see David dropped some more messages here. Let's catch up. If Apple ever stops updating the HomePod, would you consider trying to make HomePods work as general speakers? Absolutely yes. There's nothing stopping you from doing that right now if you can figure out the right crossover frequency and filtering the analog input and just wiring right directly into the speakers. There's nothing stopping anybody from doing that now. I've got one floating around here somewhere that I've done that too. But, there's let's see, there's three ultimate different paths that a first gen HomePod's gonna end up on. The first one is no more software updates, and you continue using it and maintaining it exactly as it is. Anything that breaks on it, you replace it to restore it back to the way it was. And in theory, if the majority of Apple's other products are to be used as examples, then it's reasonable to think that the HomePod, at least as it is today, will continue to function at least as good and as much as it does today for the rest of forever, I guess, until you decide to stop keeping it going. That's the first path. The second of three paths is like you were talking about in the chat, David, where you basically take all of the guts out and you just run straight analog audio wires into the speakers and feed it an external amplified source. The third one is the one that I'm really interested in the most, is ditching the internals so we don't have to worry about Apple's crap anymore, and finding an aftermarket amplifier that fits inside of here that's powerful enough to drive all the speakers, small enough to fit inside, of course, has AirPlay 2 functionality. That is an absolute requirement for me. And added bonuses would be, Bluetooth, auxiliary input, true surround sound configuration, all sorts of support for all sorts of things, And it looks like we're really close, but I haven't found anything yet that quite checks all those boxes. But that's the third and my preferred path for HomePods in the long term. I don't foresee Apple ever pushing an update, intentionally at least, that just completely disables HomePods as an AirPlay speaker with basic Siri voice support. But only time will prove me right or wrong. Yeah. Alright, first up, a little bit of maintenance, like always, with some replacement filters. We don't want to go through all the trouble of fixing this thing's power issue just to have to take it back in a few months for some flatulence. Oh, there we go. Feels like every time I do those filters, they get more and more fiddly. Oh yeah, and if I do make any breakthroughs on Afterlife HomePod stuff, that'll be up on the website too. Hopefully no one that's interested will miss it. That's a good question. No, at least for the immediate future, the plan is to just keep doing HomePods as long as they keep showing up. As more second gens age, I'm sure we'll see problems with them pop up, and demand for repairing those will spring up. I can't imagine it's going to be as high as the demand for the first gens, though. They knocked it out of the park with the first gen and kind of butchered it with the second gen, in my opinion. But anyways, we're just kind of going by what life throws at us right now, and we thankfully kind of have the luxury of doing that because this isn't our main source of income. I mean, don't get me wrong, it definitely helps pay for the baby food. Boy, our kid's expensive. But, yeah, that's, at least for now, we're just gonna be working on what we get, and then we'll see what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll blow up and get real big and do a whole bunch of just silly stuff. That would be cool. And then our full-time job will just be silly stuff on YouTube. And we can go to Open Source and slap people with speakers like that one ancient town in the Bible that would slap people with fish. Unfortunately, somebody already took my spot for Speaker Carnage, aka Garrett Claridge, but he does a really good job at it. I can't deny that. Oh yeah, to your point about your airport router not receiving updates. Um, it does still function the way they left it, though, at least, right? I know at least, and that's why the Airport Express V2 still holds a decent amount of value, like incredible value, really. For 15 to 30 bucks used, you can get an Airport Express V2, and it's a tiny little airport, guy, but the big perk with it that none of the other airport devices have is AirPlay 2 support, and it can act as an AirPlay 2 speaker output using its 3.5mm auxiliary port on the back, which also doubles as an optical jack. Like, what the heck? And what's even wilder is the update that came out that enabled all of the support for this. Came out years after they discontinued the hardware in the first place. It's insane. They never updated it again after that, but frankly, it's never really needed it. The hardware can't support anything newer. Why won't it? At that point, if you can't add any new features or anything to it, leave it as it is, let it work as long as it can, and focus on features on the newer hardware to do the newer stuff, and people that want to buy the newer stuff can. People that are perfectly happy and don't need to upgrade keep using the stuff they've got forever until they feel like upgrading. And when people do upgrade, I don't think the old stuff should get thrown in the trash or even necessarily recycled. The first step towards unwanted tech should be directly to reuse. Recycling is, obviously much more preferred over throwing it in the trash. But it does take a lot of resources to properly recycle something. And of course, it's the most effective to reduce your consumption in the first place, blah blah blah, but I'm a hoarder. We've long skipped that step. The reusing, that speaks to me. It's definitely not as secure as modern routers. So WPA2, I believe, is what most of the Airport Express routers support. Is if I'm not mistaken, I think it's somewhat crackable if somebody's got, if somebody's motivated enough. And I mean, that's the moral of it, really, is at the end of the day, if anybody's motivated enough, they can hack you no matter what you got. But the idea is balance of security and convenience, and WPA2 is still pretty good for general use. And I personally still only have WPA2 enabled on my stuff because WPA3 is still barely supported on, barely properly, really properly supported on new stuff without problems. So the time will come when WPA3 is ubiquitous and WPA2 is just, a piece of cake in the park to crack. Some kid in the back of their mom's van is waiting for their mom to get out of the grocery store, and they see your Wi-Fi network pop up on their phone, and they get bored and decide to try Wi-Fi cracking one day, and totally wasn't me, but yeah, no, it's kind of you kind of have to have that personal risk assessment. Like, are you in a place and are you personally that much of a target and that vulnerable that it's that much of a concern or not? And at least currently, I don't think the majority of people need WPA3 still. Just because it still kind of has its problems, and it's not quite fully supported on everything yet. Give it another year or so, and maybe my answer on that would change. I've got Comcast and Quantum Fiber. The Comcast is just regular old copper, and the Quantum's obviously fiber. So I've got 2 internet services in case anything happens. You know, I gotta stream. I gotta work remotely most of the time too. I need the internet to do my jobs. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, no, but obviously I have to use the modems that both of them provide, even with my my custom gateway, my UniFi gateway. But I totally didn't take my Comcast modem apart and physically disconnect the Wi-Fi modules so that it would stop broadcasting and overlapping hidden and guest Wi-Fi networks after I've already turned all that other stuff off in the UI. Totally didn't do that. And you should not do that either, because it is incredibly illegal. But if for whatever reason you're highly motivated to disable the built-in Wi-Fi on your Comcast modem, you should be able to give them a call and complain about it enough, and they can totally turn it off for you. It's a lot easier. Alright, I was pretty much yapping the whole time, and I tend to, well, let's just see here. Beautiful. Alright, folks. Derek, glad you could make it and see us revive your pod for you. Everyone else, that's actually it. We've got nothing else here, so I hope you all enjoyed this live stream repair, and I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye. Talk to me. Say something.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet.
Yeah.